Child soldiers in the Korean War. For teens and kids like me, school and chores are the only things we need worry about. Not many of us have to constantly wonder if we have to kill someone to prevent ourselves from being killed. We can get an education and grow up never having to worry about getting kidnapped from our homes and being forced into the army. This isn't the case for tens of thousands of children. A lot of people know about child soldiers, particularly because in places such as Africa, some places in South America and the Middle East, these children are forcibly used for war or other inhumane violations. Many of these children and teens have been coerced into becoming soldiers or slaves, and even when they were given a choice, their options are usually join or die. They're forced to witness and commit horrific acts of violence against people, including their own family and friends, or otherwise face torture and or murder. These kids aren't physically ready for war, but it's obvious that the leaders who use child soldiers don't care. They enlist children to fight and don't even bother to think about the consequences. Just like adult soldiers, children who are forced to fight in war also suffer from PTSD or other psychological and physical disorders. Without the right type of support, it would be harder to cope with the disorders. In the Korean conflict, a proxy war that not many people know about, both South and North Korea enlisted children to fight during the war. 3,000 of the 30,000 total children died during the conflict. Many were forced to become soldiers against their will, much like the modern-day child soldiers. Another similarity between modern-day child soldiers and the ones in the Korean War was that they were underfed. This made it harder to have the energy to carry the heavy equipment most soldiers are given, as well as participate in the long treks across usually rough terrain. Some of these soldiers have had to kill their comrades or commit other acts of violence which could elicit PTSD, depression, or other trauma-related disorders. For most people, it's hard to talk about traumatic events because reliving something that caused a person physical or emotional pain is a difficult thing to do. Life after the war for the South Korean child soldiers was still rough. Some of the soldiers had multiple jobs and many of them couldn't finish their education. While North Korea dedicated a monument to their child soldiers who fought during the war, South Korea refused to acknowledge the children who sacrificed their childhood and on one occasion their lives. I believe it's wrong that the government tried to almost erase the fact that they used child soldiers during the war. The former child soldiers asked the Korean government to create a memorial that was dedicated to the children who sacrificed their lives. After so many years of being ignored, however, many of them got discouraged. Creating a memorial for the child soldiers during the Korean War will help remind South Korea, as well as the world, about what happens when child soldiers are used in war, rather than glorifying it the way North Korea did. If South Korea doesn't acknowledge the former child soldiers, they could end up repeating that mistake in a future war. Children should be able to grow up feeling safe and well cared for. They shouldn't have to worry about getting murdered or tortured or having to commit those acts. The warring African, South American and Asian governments need to stop using child soldiers and find a way to protect the kids who are kidnapped. Protecting citizens and children is an important part of ruling a country. It's frustrating to think that these governments aren't enforcing the laws stopping children from being forced into military and slavery. We can't change the fact that child soldiers were used in the Korean conflict and modern wars, but we need to remember their sacrifice and stop using child soldiers in wars. Some people may ask why we should learn about the Korean child soldiers. I believe it's important because not many people talk about the Korean conflict. If we can exclude the children who fought in the war, people will never know all the sacrifices that were made during the war.
Please hang up and try again.